Cleopatra VII, the queen who played empires. Let's talk about the last pharaoh of Egypt, Cleopatra VII, a woman whose brilliance shook both Rome and history itself. Born in 69 BCE, she was not a traditional queen draped in gold. She was a multilingual scholar who spoke at least 7 languages and studied politics, economics, and science in Alexandria's great libraries. When she took the throne at just 18, Egypt was already a Roman client state, half broken under debt. Her first great move, Julius Caesar. After being exiled by her brother, Cleopatra famously, yes, quite literally, rolled herself inside a carpet to sneak into Caesar's quarters. That bold stunt won her not just the throne again, but also Rome's strongest ally. She bore him a son, Caesarion, binding Egypt's future to Rome's. After Caesar's assassination, she aligned with Mark Antony, his top general. Their partnership was part love, part strategy, 2 rulers dreaming of a Mediterranean empire. Together, they ruled the East for over a decade, until Octavian, Caesar's heir, declared war. At Actium in 31 BCE, Antony and Cleopatra's fleet was crushed. Facing capture, Antony fell on his sword. Cleopatra followed, said to have taken her own life with an asp, the Egyptian cobra. She was just 39. Her death marked the end of the pharaohs and the rise of Rome's empire. Yet, Cleopatra's legend lived on, portrayed for 2,000 years as temptress, nationalist, and symbol of female intellect in a man's world. She didn't just rule Egypt, she rewrote how the world remembers power and passion. Queen Jezebel, the woman who terrified prophets and kings. Let's step back almost 3,000 years to the Kingdom of Israel, where power wore jewels and danger spoke softly. Queen Jezebel, daughter of the Phoenician king Ethbal of Sidon, married King Ahab of Israel to seal a political alliance. But she brought far more than diplomacy. She brought her gods, her pride, and a fire that burned through Israel's history. Raised amid the bustling coastal temples of Phoenicia, Jezebel was a believer in Baal and Asherah, not the Hebrew god. When she became queen, she sponsored hundreds of Baal priests, built temples across the land, and fiercely resisted the prophets who condemned her religion. Her defiance of the prophet Elijah turned her into Scripture's ultimate villain. The story that sealed her infamy came from a political killing. She orchestrated the stoning of Naboth, a farmer whose vineyard the king desired. His blood on royal soil symbolized corruption at its peak. Afterwards, Elijah pronounced doom. Dogs would one day devour Jezebel's body. For over a decade, she remained a force behind the throne, manipulating alliances and keeping her dynasty in power. But fate caught up when her son's rebellion failed. As enemy troops marched into Jezreel, the aging queen faced them from her window, painted and unbowed. She was thrown down by her own servants. Dogs tore her remains, exactly as foretold. In life, she ruled like a lioness. In memory, she became a metaphor for female defiance and moral danger. Whether monster or misunderstood power broker, Jezebel's name still echoes whenever ambition, faith, and scandal collide.
Empress Zetian, the concubine who crowned herself emperor. In the glittering heart of Tang Dynasty China, power was supposed to belong to men, until Zetian rewrote the rules. Born in 624 CE to a prosperous family, she entered the imperial court as a bright-eyed 14-year-old concubine to Emperor Taizong. When he died, custom demanded she retire to a convent, but Wu was never one to follow rules. She returned to court, captured the heart of his son, Gaozong, and slowly became China's most formidable woman. Officially empress, privately she ran the government. When Gaozong suffered a series of strokes, Wu controlled the palace, the ministers, even the army. She built a vast network of spies and informants, removing rivals with surgical precision, sometimes through exile, sometimes by execution. But behind her feared reputation was ruthless competence. She promoted scholars by merit, expanded the exam system, strengthened agriculture, and raised the status of women at court. In 690 CE, at age 65, she did what no woman had ever done, declared herself emperor, founding her own dynasty, the Zhou. For 15 years, she ruled a realm of more than 50 million people, maintaining stability through intellect, propaganda, and sheer willpower. When age and illness finally forced her abdication in 705, ministers erased her new dynasty and restored the Tang, but they couldn't erase her legacy. Wu Zetian proved that genius and ferocity could shatter centuries of tradition. To this day, historians debate whether she was a tyrant or a pioneer. But either way, she remains China's one and only female emperor, a symbol of brilliance wrapped in danger. Isabella of France, the she-wolf who brought down a king. Now let's meet the queen medieval chroniclers both feared and admired. Isabella of France, daughter of the powerful King Philip IV, and wife to England's troubled monarch Edward II. Born into royal splendor around 1295, she was sent to London at age 12 to cement peace between England and France, but her marriage soon turned into open humiliation. Edward's deep attachment to his favorites, first Piers Gaveston, later Hugh Despencer the Younger, left Isabella isolated and politically sidelined. Despencer's greed wrecked noble alliances, and when Edward let him seize her lands, the queen's patience snapped. In 1325, she crossed the Channel on a diplomatic mission and simply refused to come home. In France, she forged a dangerous partnership with an exiled noble named Roger Mortimer, equal parts lover and co-conspirator. Together, they raised an army, landed in England in 1326, and in mere weeks toppled the king's regime. Edward II fled, Despencer was captured and gruesomely executed, and Isabella became the de facto ruler of England through her teenage son Edward III. But power has a short shelf life. After Edward II's suspicious death, many believe he was murdered at Berkeley Castle, whispers branded Isabella the she-wolf of France. Within 3 years, her son came to age, seized control, and imprisoned her partner Mortimer, who was hanged for treason. Isabella was spared, living her final decades in quiet comfort, cloaked monks at her side. Her story endures as one of medieval Europe's most dramatic reversals, a silenced wife who became a conqueror, then a scandal, and ultimately a symbol of just how perilous and intoxicating female power could be.
Joanna of Naples, the queen who dared to rule and paid the price. Picture 14th century Naples, golden light, ruthless politics, and a teenage girl handed a throne. Joanna of Naples, born 1326, inherited one of Europe's wealthiest kingdoms at just 16. Intelligent, multilingual, and fiercely independent, she faced a court that doubted any woman could rule. Her arranged marriage to Andrew of Hungary, a prince meant to secure political peace, turned disastrous. The young couple clashed over power. Andrew wanted the crown in his own name, while Neapolitan nobles backed Joanna as sole sovereign. In 1345, during a hunting trip, Andrew was found strangled and left hanging from a balcony. The scandal erupted instantly. All eyes turned to Joanna. Panic and outrage followed. Hungary's royal family demanded revenge, Pope Clement VI opened an inquiry, and for the next decade, Joanna faced 4 separate trials for murder and poisoning. Each time, her eloquence and lack of proof saved her, yet whispers never stopped. Meanwhile, she proved remarkably capable, rebuilding the economy, protecting artists, and steering Naples through the chaos of the Black Death. Her final downfall came from politics, not love. In 1381, a rival claimant, Charles of Durazzo, backed by Hungary's army, invaded. Joanna was captured, imprisoned in a fortress near Naples, and strangled in 1382 at age 56. Whether she poisoned her husband or merely refused to kneel, Joanna of Naples remains a tragic icon. A brilliant monarch trapped between medieval sexism, papal intrigue, and the hazards of ruling with both beauty and brains in a world that forgave neither. Catherine de' Medici, the queen mother who turned politics into survival. Step into 16th century France, a nation torn by faith and ambition, and meet Catherine de' Medici, the Florentine banker's daughter who became one of Europe's most powerful women. Born 1519,
Married at 14 to Henry II of France, she spent her early years quietly at court until his death in 1559 thrust her into chaos. Now mother to 3 boy kings, Francis I, Charles IX, and Henry III, Catherine fought to keep a kingdom from tearing itself apart in the savage wars between Catholics and Protestants. She ruled not by armies but by intellect, arranging marriages, decoding letters, bribing spies, and dazzling nobles with art and spectacle while balancing rivals who wanted her dead. Her greatest stain came on August 24, 1572, when thousands of Huguenots were killed in Paris during the St. Bartholomew's Day Mass. Some said Catherine ordered the carnage, others argued she lost control of events she meant to contain. Whatever the truth, her name was forever tied to the blood on Paris's streets. Yet she endured, holding power for nearly 30 years, a lifetime in an age that chewed through monarchs. She strengthened the navy, supported science and architecture, and kept the fragile Valois dynasty alive through 4 civil wars. Catherine de' Medici was no poisoner from legend, but a political survivor, a mother holding a burning crown with bare hands. To her critics, she embodied cunning. To France, she was the reason it still had a throne to fight over.
Queen Mary I, the woman who set England on fire for her faith. When Mary Tudor took the throne in 1553, England held its breath. She was the daughter of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon, raised devoutly Catholic but scarred by her father's break from Rome. For years she lived in fear, declared illegitimate, stripped of her titles, forced to watch her mother die in disgrace. So when the crown finally landed on her head at age 37, she saw not triumph, but a divine mission to save her country's soul. Determined to undo her father's Protestant reforms, Mary reunited England with the Catholic Church and married Spain's Prince Philip II, hoping to secure a Catholic heir and a powerful alliance. What followed, though, turned her reign into legend, and not the flattering kind. Between 1555 and 1558, roughly 280 Protestants were executed as heretics, many burned publicly at the stake. Their screams echoed across England, earning Mary the chilling nickname Bloody Mary. She believed those flames purified a nation, but they instead hardened resistance. Philip spent little time in England. Her longed-for pregnancy ended in heartbreaking false alarms, and every victory in faith brought another defeat in love and politics. When she died in 1558, childless and exhausted, her Protestant half-sister, Elizabeth I, succeeded her, swiftly reversing Mary's policies. History branded her a villain, yet beneath the ashes lay tragedy. A woman taught that faith was obedience, ruling a country shifting toward freedom of conscience. Mary I reigned for just 5 years, but her fight over England's soul still defines the line between conviction and cruelty. Mary, Queen of Scots, the tragic queen who loved and lost her crown. If ever a life played like a Shakespearean tragedy before Shakespeare, it was that of Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots. Born 1542, crowned at just 6 days old, she was raised in the glittering French court, educated, charming, and every inch the Renaissance queen. Married at 15 to Francis II of France, she became queen consort, but when he died 2 years later, the young widow returned home to a rougher land and a people divided by religion. Scotland was turning Protestant, while Mary remained devoutly Catholic, a powder keg already lit. Still, her beauty and charisma won her enemies and admirers alike. The real scandal arrived with her second husband, Lord Darnley. Handsome, vain, and unstable, he soon turned violent and jealous. Then came a mysterious explosion in 1567. Darnley's house destroyed, his body found strangled in a garden. Suspicion pointed straight at Mary and one of her nobles, James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell, whom she married just weeks later. The match looked like confession to murder. Scotland revolted. Betrayed and imprisoned, Mary abdicated in favor of her infant son, James VI, and fled to England,
right into the hands of her cousin, Elizabeth I. She expected refuge. She found house arrest that lasted 19 years. When Catholic plots formed to place her on England's throne, letters tied to Mary sealed her fate. In 1587, she was executed by beheading, stoic to the end, dressed in red, the color of martyrdom. Mary, Queen of Scots, remains one of history's most magnetic enigmas, saint or schemer, victim or conspirator, a woman trapped between dynasties, faith, and the deadly politics of love.
Anne Boleyn, the queen who cost England its faith and her life. Few figures transformed England as swiftly as Anne Boleyn. Born around 1501 to an ambitious Norfolk family, she was educated in the refined courts of France, where she learned charm, intellect, and political finesse. When she returned to England, she wasn't just beautiful. She was magnetic, sharp, and far from obedient. King Henry VIII noticed her in 1525, while still married to Catherine of Aragon. Anne refused to be his mistress. She wanted a crown. That single no lit a fire that changed history. Henry begged the Pope for an annulment. When Rome refused, he broke from the Catholic Church, founding the Church of England, a revolution sparked by love and ambition. They wed in secret in 1533. Anne was crowned queen in triumph, but bore only a daughter, Princess Elizabeth. Henry's obsession with a son turned to anger. Enemies like Thomas Cromwell seized the chance, accusing Anne of adultery, incest, and witchcraft. On May 19, 1536, at Tower Green, she knelt calmly before a French swordsman. She was just 35. Henry married Jane Seymour days later. Yet Anne's legacy outlived them all. Her daughter, Elizabeth I, became England's greatest ruler. The queen who died for love birthed the monarch who defined an age. Anne Boleyn's story remains the most dazzling blend of intellect, defiance, and tragedy ever to wear a crown. Marie Antoinette, the queen who danced as a kingdom starved. Few names sparkle and shatter like Marie Antoinette. Born in 1755 to the mighty Habsburg dynasty of Austria, she married France's Louis XVI at 14 to seal peace between empires. At first, she was the darling of Versailles, charming, fashionable, and naively confident that glitter equaled love. But France beyond the gilded gates was rotting with debt and hunger, a truth she barely saw. At just 19, she became queen. So began the legend of excess: diamonds, masked balls, towering wigs, and the mythic quote she never said, "Let them eat cake." In reality, her spending was exaggerated. The monarchy's crisis owed more to war costs than gowns. But perception rules politics, and Madame Deficit became the symbol of everything wrong with privilege. Seeking refuge from court intrigue, she built the Petit Trianon, a private retreat where she played shepherdess while Parisians lined up for bread. Rumors of affairs, especially with Count Axel von Fersen, and scandals like the diamond necklace affair deepened public hatred. Pamphlets painted her as immoral, foreign, and indifferent. When revolution erupted in 1789, she stood beside her timid husband as the palace fell around them. Imprisoned after Louis's execution, she faced her own trial in 1793, charged with treason and shocking personal crimes. Calm and defiant, she rode to the guillotine in a plain white gown, age 37. Her death closed the chapter on royal absolutism in France. Over time, myth yielded to complexity. Marie Antoinette was vain, yes, but also courageous. A queen raised for splendor who met ruin with spine-straight grace. She remains history's caution and fascination. A woman who lost her head and became immortal.
Empress Elizabeth of Austria, Sisi, the restless royal who loved freedom more than a crown. In the stiff, buttoned-up court of 19th century Vienna, Empress Elizabeth of Austria, lovingly called Sisi, was a lightning bolt of rebellion disguised in jewels.
Born in 1837 into Bavarian nobility, she was carefree and outdoorsy until fate and royal matchmaking brought her to Vienna at 16 to marry Emperor Franz Joseph I. She didn't marry just a man, she married an empire, and it nearly smothered her. Sisi's beauty became her fame and her prison. Standing nearly 5 feet 8 inches tall, with hair that fell to her ankles, she ruled Europe's gossip columns before gossip columns existed. Terrified of aging, she adopted near-mythic routines, daily 6-hour grooming sessions, strict diets never over 50 kilograms, and exercise that would shame modern athletes. She even had a gym installed in the palace. Yet behind the elegance hid deep melancholy. The death of her first daughter and the suicide of her only son, Crown Prince Rudolph, left emotional scars that never healed. To escape court suffocation, Sisi roamed endlessly. Hungary, Greece, the Alps, becoming a kind of royal ghost more adored abroad than at home. Her openness to Hungarian culture helped forge the Austro-Hungarian Compromise of 1867, one of her few political triumphs. In 1898, while traveling unguarded in Geneva, she was assassinated by an anarchist, killed with a single stiletto blade to the heart. Even in death, she was graceful and tragic. Sisi remains Europe's eternal romantic enigma, a woman modern in her yearning for freedom, yet shackled by impossible ideals of beauty and duty. The empress who tried to outrun her crown ultimately became its most haunting legend. Empress Alexandra Fedorovna, the last empress who trusted the wrong prophet. At the twilight of imperial Russia stood Empress Alexandra Fedorovna, born Princess Alex of Hesse in 1872, granddaughter of Queen Victoria and wife to Tsar Nicholas II. Beautiful, devout, and shy, she longed for a peaceful life with her husband and children. Instead, she became the face of an empire collapsing under its own weight. Her tragedy began with love and blood. Alexandra bore 4 daughters before finally giving birth to a son, Alexei, the long-awaited heir. But the boy suffered from hemophilia, a fatal blood clotting disorder. Desperate to save him, the empress turned toward mysticism and faith healing, and into her life walked Grigory Rasputin, a coarse Siberian monk whose prayers seemed to ease the child's pain. Rasputin's influence grew immense. Alexandra saw him as God's instrument, courtiers saw corruption and decay. His drunken behavior, rumors of affairs, and sway over royal appointments made the imperial court a scandal machine. While Nicholas led armies during World War I, Alexandra effectively ran the government through Rasputin's advice, an arrangement that destroyed trust between monarchy and people. By 1916, frustration boiled over. Nobles murdered Rasputin, but it was already too late. Revolution erupted months later. Nicholas II abdicated, ending 300 years of Romanov rule. Alexandra and her family were imprisoned by Bolsheviks, and in 1918, they were executed in Yekaterinburg, a dynasty reduced to gunfire in a cellar. History remembers her as naive, fanatical, and tragically human. A mother's love turned into political catastrophe. Alexandra Fedorovna was not Russia's villain, but its final, fatal illusion. Proof that blind faith at the top of a crumbling empire can pull the whole palace down.
Queen Ranavalona I, the mad queen who kept Madagascar free. In the early 1800s, when European empires carved up Africa like a map, one island refused to bow. That island was Madagascar, and its ruler, Queen Ranavalona I, would become both feared and fascinating. Born a commoner around 1778, she rose to power through cunning and marriage, eventually becoming queen in 1828 after the suspicious death of her husband, King Radama I. From that moment, her message was clear. Madagascar would belong to the Malagasy, no one else. Ranavalona reversed her late husband's pro-European policies, expelling missionaries, restricting foreign trade, and declaring Christianity illegal. She sought to restore traditional faith and independence, but her zeal often turned cruel. Tens of thousands of converts, nobles, and suspected traitors faced forced labor, execution, or the infamous Tangina ordeal, a poison trial that many did not survive.
Yet despite the bloodshed, her reign also showed shrewd statecraft. She maintained 43 years of independence while neighboring kingdoms fell to colonial powers. She modernized parts of the army, built roads, and encouraged domestic industry, all without foreign loans or control. Europeans called her the Mad Queen, but in Madagascar, many saw a patriot fighting for survival against imperialism. By the time she died in 1861, well into her 80s, she'd left behind a country both traumatized and uncolonized, a paradox of tyranny and sovereignty. Ranavalona I remains one of history's harshest yet most effective isolationist rulers, a queen who ruled with fear, faith, and ferocity, proving that even an island could defy an empire, if its will was hard enough.
Queen Soraya Tarzi, the woman who tried to modernize Afghanistan a century too soon. Long before most of the world spoke of women's rights, Queen Soraya Tarzi stood beneath the Afghan sun, unveiled, educated, and unafraid. Born 1899 in Damascus to an exiled Afghan reformer, Soraya grew up learning poetry, politics, and history, rare privileges for girls of her time. When Amanullah Khan became king in 1919 and married her, they became Afghanistan's most revolutionary couple. Together, they launched an audacious modernization campaign, founding girls' schools, sending female students to Europe, opening the first women's magazine, and pushing for literacy and health reforms across the kingdom. In 1928, Soraya made headlines worldwide by appearing without a veil, shaking hands with men in public, and declaring, "Our men and women are like two wings of a bird. Both must work equally for it to fly." It was shocking, inspiring, and dangerous. Conservatives raged, clerics denounced her as immoral, foreign agents spread rumors, and tribal uprisings erupted. By 1929, rebellion toppled the reformist monarchy. Amanullah and Soraya fled the country, exiled for life after ruling barely 10 years. They settled quietly in Italy, never again seeing Afghanistan. Soraya devoted herself to education and humanitarian work until her death in 1968. Though branded scandalous in her day, history remembers Soraya Tarzi as a visionary who glimpsed an Afghanistan of schools, equality, and progress, and paid exile's price for daring to dream it too loudly. She stood decades ahead of her time, leaving echoes still audible anytime Afghan women fight to raise their voices.
Princess Margaret, the rebel royal who refused to behave. In a monarchy built on discipline, Princess Margaret Rose, younger sister of Queen Elizabeth II, was the brilliant rule breaker. Born 1930, she grew up in pampered isolation, adored by her father King George VI, and thrust into the spotlight when Elizabeth became queen in 1952. Suddenly, the charming spare became half-royal icon, half-restless celebrity. She fell deeply for Group Captain Peter Townsend, a divorced war hero. In conservative 1950s Britain, royals marrying divorcees was scandalous. Under political and church pressure, Margaret renounced the match in 1955, telling the world she must place duty before love, a heartbreak broadcast in headlines across the planet. She later married photographer Anthony Armstrong Jones, Lord Snowdon, embracing London's booming art scene. Their glamorous marriage blended palaces with parties, but constant attention and rumored affairs strained it. They divorced in 1978, the first modern royal divorce, and the press devoured every frame. Margaret's jet-set lifestyle, chain-smoking, and sharp wit made her a paparazzi obsession long before Diana. Yet behind the glamour lay fragility, severe stress, illness, and heavy scrutiny. In middle age, she suffered strokes, retreating to private island life in Mustique. When she died in 2002, aged 71, opinion was still split: spoiled socialite or spirited survivor. But history has softened her image. Princess Margaret embodied the royal paradox: glamorous yet grieving, loyal yet rebellious, trapped inside tradition but determined to live by her own rules. She didn't inherit the crown, she inherited its spotlight and refused to dim it.